Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to our panelists. This is wonderful testimony, and I'm glad this is the first of several hearings because there's a lot to wrap our heads around. Dr. Chaudhuri, as you know, large language models have basically vacuumed up all the information from the internet, and there's a dispute between copyright holders who feel they ought to be compensated, others who feel it's a fair use of the information. You know, it's in court. They'll probably decide it before Congress will. But here's a question I've had. What techniques are possible to identify copyrighted material in the training corpus of the large language models? Is it even possible to go back and identify protected material?
Thank you for the excellent question. It's not easy. It is quite difficult. What we really need is protections for the individuals generating this artwork because they are at risk of having not only their work stolen, but their entire livelihood taken from them.
No, I understand, but the question is retroactively, is it possible to identify?
It's difficult to, but yes, it can. One can use digital imaging matching, but it's also important to think through, you know, what we are doing with the data, what it is being used for.
I understand that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
One of the things I'm interested in, you mentioned CFAA, and that's a barrier to people trying to do third-party analysis. I had a bill actually after Aaron Schwartz's untimely and sad demise. I had a bill named after him to allow those who are making non-commercial use to actually do what Aaron was doing. And Jim Sensenbrenner was my co-sponsor since retired. And we couldn't get anywhere. There were large vested interests who opposed that. Do you think if we approached it just as those who register rather than be licensed with the government as non-commercial entities that are doing red shirting, whether that would be a viable model for what you're suggesting?
I think so, yes. I think that would be a great start. I do think there would need to be follow-up to ensure that people are indeed using it for non-commercial purposes.
Correct. I'm interested in the whole issue of licensing versus registration. I'm mindful that the Congress really doesn't know enough in many cases to create a licensing regime, and the technology is moving so fast that I fear we might make some mistakes or federal agencies might make some mistakes. But licensing, which is giving permission, would be different than registration, which would allow for the capacity to oversee and prevent harm. What's your thought on the two alternatives? Anyone who wants to speak?
I can speak to that. I think overly onerous licensing would actually prevent people from doing one-off experimental or fun exercises. What we have to understand is, you know, there is a particular scale of impact, number of people being, you know, using a product that maybe would trigger licensing rather than saying everybody needs to license. There are college students, high school kids who want to use these models and just do fun things, and we should allow them to do it.
You know, I guess I have some qualms, and other members may. You know, we've got large model AIs, and to some extent they are a black box. Even the creators don't fully understand what they're doing, and the idea that we would have a licensing regime, I think, is very daunting, as opposed to a registration regime where we might have the capacity for third parties to do auditing and the like. I'll just lay that out there. I want to ask anybody who can answer this question. When it comes to large language models, generative AI, the computing power necessary is so immense that we've ended up with basically 3 very large private sector entities who have the computing capacity to actually do that. Mr. Altman was here I think last month, and opined when he met with us at the Aspen Institute breakfast that it might not even be possible to catch up in terms of the pure computing power. We've had discussions here on whether the government should create the computing power to allow not only private sector but academics to be competitive. Is that even viable at this point? Whoever could answer that?
I can take that real quick. I believe so. I think it is possible. Bear in mind that the compute resources that were created by these three entities were initially meant for internal consumption.
Correct.
And they have been repurposed now for training AI. In semiconductor development, which is the core of this technology, there is ultimately a trade-off between narrow functionality and or breadth of functionality and performance at a single use case. And so if there was a decision made to build resources that were targeted at training large language models, for example, I think it would be possible to quickly catch up and build that resource the same way we built specific resources during World War II for a certain type of warfare, and then again during the Persian Gulf War. So I think we as a nation are capable of doing that.
I see my time has expired. I thank you so much, and my additional questions we'll send to you after the hearing, and I yield back.